All right, here we are again. Thank you very much for stopping by, and I'm glad you could join me for this video. So here we've got some knives that we need to put some bevels into. These are the 4 knives we've been working on. I think this is video number 5. But anyway, I'll try to make this a little shorter, but I'll share with you what I know. When I first started doing this about 5 years ago or so, I was dead set on buying a jig because it seemed like it was the easiest way to grind bevels and all that good stuff. I think I used it for about a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, I don't know. It was not too long. And I quickly realized that for me, this wasn't the way to go. It's fine if you're doing basic knives with just a simple grind on them, but it really limits your ability to do some more compound grinds, I guess, if you want to call it. Like, for instance, if you're making a dagger, if you do a dagger with a jig, your tip is going to be the same exact grind as the rest of the knife. Usually in a dagger you want a strong point for stabbing, and when you can't control how you're turning it and what material you're taking off, you're just going to have a really I don't want to say flexible, but it's going to be thinner that you want it. It's not going to be as stout of a point. When you are freehand grinding, you can, twist back or move the grind to allow for a thicker, more stout tip. Another example would be a kukri, where a kukri has 2 different bevel angles. Down where it's thick, it's more like this. Up in the front, where where the blade is wider, it's going to be a more narrow grind. With a jig, you can't really do that. You could put it on the jig and do one angle and change it, do another angle, and then try to blend those in. But if you're freehand grinding, you just change the angle as you go. And what I found is that when you first start freehand grinding, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But then you get used to it, and all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to many more possibilities than using a jig. And don't get me wrong, jigs are fine, but I'm really glad that I quit using this and I learned to do this freehand. So first things first, we're gonna hop on the grinder and we're gonna clean these up. Take it to about 120 grit or higher if you want, and then we'll mark this and we'll start grinding in our bevels. So we're going to start with a fresh 80 grit, and there's 2 ways to do this really. So you can put it on like this if you want to make sure you're getting your flats flat. If you had any warps in the heat treat, in the quench, if you need to make sure you're pulling out all those warps, you can put a magnet on this and just go at it like this. Nothing wrong with that. I do it a lot. For the longer blades, it's kind of harder to do that. So I will start like this, just taking off some of this material, and then I'll check it along here just to make sure that I'm not creating any bows in this knife. So we're just going to go across it like this, and then when I'm done with the 80, I'm going to go to 120. That way the flats are going to be up to where I usually start my hand sanding. got these nice, pretty knives, ground up to 120 on the flats. And that's usually where I start my hand sanding. If I feel a little ambitious, I'll go up to like 220 or so. But I found that it doesn't make a lot of difference for me. So anyway, got these 4. Now I'm going to spray these with some blue Dykem so that I can draw my layout lines on them. Got the blue Dykem on, and it is dry on all 4 of these. So the next thing I want to do is draw my bevel line. And pretty much all of these, I'm not going to do a full flat for the grind. I'm just going to come up to where the ricasso or the bolster area kind of transitions. So I'll just come up this high, and I'm going to do that for all of them so they all match. So kind of get up close to where I want to be, and then just draw a line right there, flip it over, do the same thing. Now if you don't have any calipers, which they're super cheap, just use your calipers. Basically do the same thing, go up to the height you want to go to, lock it down, and then just transfer your line on there like so. They both work. You can even go as far as to just taking a scribe, and it's a little more difficult, but you use your finger as a guide, and then you'll just draw it on there like that. You can see that works just fine. I'm just going to use this. That way both sides are going to be the same. Okay, so we have our bevel height. Now we just need to mark our center line down the edge, and I also do a center line down the spine. So I've got this little height gauge, height scribe, whatever the crap this thing's called, and I use it for my handles too. So I made this little, it's just a pencil that I flatten the edges that it fits right in that holder. But it actually came with this little scribe piece that goes in here. And the way this works is you want to take this all the way down here so it's touching your flat surface, and you can see it's pretty close to 0. So we'll just leave it there. If it wasn't, which now it's really not, you just loosen up this screw right here, turn it to 0, lock that back up, you're good to go. So what I want to do is I want to raise this and get my height, my thickness of my steel here. So we're at 105 here. And so we'll lock those down, and then we want to go to half the distance. So loosen those screws up again, and then we're going to go to, we'll just say 50. So it's a little less than half, but I think we'll be just fine. And then lock those down. And then what I'll do is I'll take this, I'll hold this down, and then just draw a line right there. And then do the same thing on this side. Draw a line right down the middle. And then we'll flip it and draw a line from the other side as well. And same thing. That way we ensure that we've got our center. And you may or may not be able to see that, but have a line right down the middle of that. So do this to all 4 of these, and we're just going to use the same thickness since we're really close anyway. And if for some reason you have to redo your lines, just slap some more blue Dykem on there. Step number 1 is to put an old belt, like an old 36 grit belt on there, 80 grit, whatever. And what you want to do is you want to knock off these hard corners. That way your belts will last a little bit longer. So put it on here and turn it like 45 degrees and just give it a quick pass to get you close to your center line. And that'll knock off the hard corners, which will keep from knocking the abrasives off the belt. Next step is throw your new belt or close to new belt on here. So I have one that's still got some pretty good life in it, so I'm going to use that. And there's also a couple ways to do this, just like with everything else in the knife making game. There's a million ways to do it. So you can either put it on at the angle you think you need to be and drag it across and just kind of check if you're at the right angle. Another way to do this is, I think it was Niels Vandenberg that kind of showed how to do this, but he calls it grind by numbers. And essentially what you're going to do is just take one section and you're going to push that until you can see it hit close to the center line and close to your bevel line. So you'll do that in one area, and then you'll just move over and kind of match that and just keep doing that. And then once you have that done, then you can drag it across and even everything out. It's pretty good way of doing it. It seems to go pretty quick. So I'll do that on this one. And then the other side, I'll kind of drag across and I'll show you the difference. Another thing to watch out for is when you have a plunge line, for instance. I don't have one in here, but you want to stay, like if your plunge line's right here, stay like a 1/4 inch away from it until you're to the higher grits. That way you don't screw up and, you know, go past where you want to be and have uneven plunge lines. The other thing is when you're setting this onto the belt, try not to hit the grind line, you know, towards the spine first, because if you mess up and go too high by hitting it here and then pressing it forward, you kind of can't fix that. The only thing you can do is go higher with the grind line. So when you're setting this on the belt, try to be more on the edge and then set it down onto the bevel. So that way, edge to spine, not spine to edge. And that'll help you not go past your bevel line. And you don't have to do these layout lines. You can just eyeball this, basically grind to where you think you're going to be, you know, check it to make sure you're down the center. The only reason why I don't do that anymore is because you're constantly grind, check in center, grind, check in center, check in bevel line, grind, you know, you're constantly checking this, you know, holding it up to the light, make sure you're still straight. But if you have lines drawn on here, you can grind, take a quick look, grind, take a quick look, and you know where you're supposed to be rather than constantly battling, you know, whether or not you've gone past or not. So both ways are fine. I just feel like this way is a little bit more efficient. Rough bevels are in. As you can see, I have a few little wobbles in here, but I'll clean these up with the 80 grit and the 120 grit. Okay, and that is that on the grinding. I got all the bevels in, and now I'm going to go on to the hand sanding. So I lied, I do have to do a little bit higher grit on the spine, kind of round over the corners. I usually do that before I hand sand, so I'll need to do that, but essentially we're done with the bevels, we're done with the grinding. So hopefully I didn't confuse you too much. If I did, you know, feel free to ask me some questions. I'm sure I left out a lot of stuff, but I really hope that this helped and it gives you a better understanding of, you know, grinding with a jig and grinding freehand, drawing layout lines, not drawing layout lines. There's really no wrong way. It's just some ways are easier than others. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.